everybody, it's Mel. Thank you so much for joining me today for my October reading wrap-up. So in October, Becca from Becca and the Books ran her Bookopoly readathon, which is a readathon that she runs based on her TBR game of Bookopoly. It would normally be in September, but this year she decided she wanted to do it in October and do a Spookopoly. So obviously I wanted to play, but this month I did not read basically any of the books. I read one book off of the TBR that I set for myself based on Bookopoly or Spookopoly. So I will link my Spookopoly TBR in the description below so you can go and check that out and figure out what I should have read. The one book that I read that was on my TBR for October was The Only Good Indians by Stephen Graham Jones. So I will talk about that now, even though it's not the first book that I picked up and it's not the first book that I finished, but I'll talk about it now because it is the only one that was on that TBR. So this book is a horror. It is set in the United States. It is about some First Nations men in the United States who, when they were in their late teens, did something that kind of goes against the cultural practices, the hunting practices, spiritual practices of their community. It is now, I think, 10 years later, and we are dealing with the ramifications of their actions and what happened. It is horror, so we are dealing with it in the form of a haunting. So there's quite a lot of supernatural things going on in the book. I don't want to say too much about it because I feel like with this sort of thing, it is very much about the sort of suspense and the slow unfolding of what is happening, and you're supposed to get into that, and I think it'll spoil it basically if I give too much away. But let's talk about what I thought of the book. So for Core Pile, I gave it a 6.29, and that is a 3.5 stars in star rating. It was a good book. It wasn't amazing. I enjoyed it. I didn't love it. Things I liked about it. I liked the fact that it was quite slow burn. I liked the way that it built towards the conclusion. I quite enjoyed the way the characters were written and the way that their various choices in their lives sort of led to what then occurred, and how the kind of haunting or vengeance that was taken out on them, how that played out and how that how that happened. So I thought that was really clever. I feel like I learnt a bit about First Nations American peoples. It wasn't super steeped in culture or spirituality or mythology or anything like that, but it was definitely a background to what was happening, and definitely there were things that I didn't know that were woven into the story, which I really, really appreciated. Yeah, so there was quite a few things that I enjoyed about it. The main reason why I didn't find it to be, like I said, the most amazing book, or an amazing book, first of all, it's probably down to horror being a genre that I don't read very often. I've started to get into it a little bit more through various conversations with other people around my horror newness. I have revealed that perhaps I do actually read horror on occasion. I just hadn't quite realised. But this is something that is definitely categorised as horror. If you go to the library and borrow it, it's in the horror section. And I don't really tend to go to that section, so I'd never really deliberately read horror. So I feel like potentially if I were more aware of the genre, more used to the genre and the way that it was structured and set up, maybe I would have enjoyed it a little bit more. I do on occasion watch horror movies. Sometimes I can be in quite the mood for a horror movie. I probably, both reading and watching, tend to be more of a thriller person than a horror person, just because I often find that that gives a bit more of kind of action and flow to the story. So I probably tend to be more on the thriller side to the horror. But I definitely quite enjoy the occasional horror movie. And I think that potentially for me, and again, this is early Mel delving into her horror era talking, so I could be completely inaccurate, or I could change mind or what have you later on. But I think for me at the moment anyway, on screen when I can actually see it, it's more immediate. I guess my imagination isn't the one doing the work for me in terms of conjuring up the scary images or the imagery or what have you. But yeah, I did enjoy it. I do think that Stephen Graham-Jones is a good writer. I can definitely see why people love his work if they love horror reading and a bit more experience in it. The main thing though that I feel like let it down for me was that it felt like two books. So you have the setup, and I get the setup. I get why it was structured the way it was, but you can have the setup for one character and then you build to this crescendo with that one character, and then you go to two other characters and it builds again. And I just felt like I was just getting into the build up, I was just getting into what happened, and then like it was a big creepy thing, and that was all the, you know, all the thing that had happened, and then it kind of dropped off and I had to build it again. I'm sure that was a deliberate choice, but I felt a little bit odd for me. Like I wasn't quite sure. Yeah, it just didn't work for me that well. So yeah, but anyway, that's the first book that I want to talk to you about. It wasn't, like I said, the first book that I read, so I'm actually going to flip back in my journal to the first book that I actually finished, which was The Once and Future Witches by Alix E. Harrow. I started this at the tail end of September and just didn't finish it in time to include it in my September wrap-up, so it's going into my October wrap-up. So I really, really enjoyed this one. In Corpile, I gave this one a 9.14, which works out to be 5 stars. So I absolutely loved it. This is my second Alix E. Harrow book. I absolutely loved The 10,000 Doors of January, which is the first book of hers that I read. Thought it was fantastic, just really well written, beautiful writing, just fantastic characters. Loved it. And I felt exactly the same way about this one. They are not connected, they don't belong to the same storyline or anything like that. I just think that her writing is beautiful. I really, really enjoy the way she structures sentences and the words that she uses in conjunction with each other, and yeah, the descriptions she uses, the comparisons, all of that sort of thing. So this book is set in New Salem in... Here it is here. Thought there was something missing, but anyway, this is the book that I read that I'm talking about. So it is set in New Salem in 1893. This is about witchcraft. It is about the suffragette movement. It is about women's rights and women's power. It is about finding your power and using your power. It is about women's rights and women's wrongs, as Katie Colson said recently, or said in a video I watched of hers recently. So we follow 3 sisters who are estranged. They had a very traumatic upbringing. Their father was an abusive drunk, and the 2 older sisters left home when they were in their kind of early mid-teens, but they all end up, without knowing it, they all end up in New Salem, and the suffragette movement is happening in New Salem, and they all get interested and involved in the suffragette movement and the rights for women movement. However, at the same time, they all 3 kind of get thrown into this new magic that is arising, and they start to develop a kind of splinter group off of the women's rights movements that is more about witchcraft and women's power. Yeah, I thought this was very, very, very well written. I thought it was really interesting. Some of the comparisons between kind of witchcraft and women's movements, and some of the parallels that were drawn between looking for power and claiming power, what power you have and how to own that power, and how to gain that power, and whether or not to work within as the law and the society in which things currently and the way things currently stand, or whether to come outside of that and do something very different. And I also really, really enjoyed the discussion of feminism within this book, not just from the point of view of kind of talking about feminism through witchcraft, but there was quite a bit of conversation around the very kind of white, very kind of upper class leaning that early feminism had. The suffragettes were, I mean, they did fantastic work, but the way that it is represented certainly now is that it was a lot of upper class women who had enough time and resources to spend money and time and resources fighting this fight, that they didn't have to go out and work in the factories or what have you. And the very, very white centered feminism that we in the West used to think of as feminism. And I haven't read it yet, but I believe that Hood Feminism by, I want to say Mickey Kendall, but I'm not sure if that's correct, but I'll put an image of the cover on the screen. I believe that's what she talks about in that book, and I definitely plan to read it at some point. And this was touched upon in this, and I thought it was a really interesting conversation and really well written into the story. Now, obviously, I am white. I believe Alix Harrow is white, so as to the representation and the accuracy of that, I can't speak. It certainly was something that was discussed and brought forward. I don't think it was done in such a way where you could say that Alix Harrow was attempting to put forward views for a BIPOC person, for BIPOC perspectives, but I just thought that it was great that it was part of the story, it was part of the conversation, because I don't think, and that's the point I think of something like Hood Feminism, is that you can't have a conversation about feminism without having a conversation about race and how those two do or don't or should intersect. So yeah, I thought it was fantastic. I really enjoyed it. Like I said, 9.4 on Copile, which is 5 stars. Okay, the next book that I read is If We Were Villains by ML Rio. I gave this one 6.86 rating on Copile, which works out again at 3.5 stars. So definitely something that I enjoyed, but definitely not something that I thought was absolutely fantastic. It was in the I enjoyed it, it was pretty good category. I'm very sorry, Brittany, if you're watching this, Shannon, if you're watching this, or anyone else that absolutely loves this book. I know that it's very, very beloved on BookTube, and I understand why. I thought that it was well written. I did enjoy the way that it was written. I did enjoy the storyline. I enjoyed the dark academia-ness of it all, but yeah. Let me talk about what the book is, and then I can discuss where it fell down for me. This is a dark academia book, so it is set in a private, basically kind of theatre college. I don't actually recall where, but it's somewhere in the United States of America, and it is, like I said, set in this theatre, private theatre university, private theatre program. We are following the perspective of one character, James? No, there was a James in the book. I can't remember the main character's name. But anyway, we are in his perspective. Simultaneously, he is talking to an ex-policeman who worked on a case that this character was put in prison for, and he's just coming out of prison. The detective is no longer a police detective. This man is telling the story of what happened. The rest of the book is him telling the story about when he was in the final year of this college and the death of a friend of his and what actually happened. And yeah, so that's the book. That's the storyline. Like I said, I thought it was very, very well written. I thought the characters were actually pretty unlikable by and large. Even the main character, who we suspect didn't do whatever it was he was supposed to do, and you could definitely tell that he was supposed to be a sympathetic character. It's about a bunch of really young people in this really rarefied environment who get away with a lot of behavior that is not necessarily okay because they are entitled, because they are rich, because they are in this rarefied university college environment. They are the seniors of the school. They consider themselves to be extremely academic, extremely well read, extremely well educated, so they are cut off from normalcy and their perspectives aren't really the real world, and so they aren't behaving particularly well. Even like I said, even the main character who you're supposed to see sympathetically, even the other character who is his best friend, who is definitely supposed to be a sympathetic character, it's very much that kind of young people all living together, get all caught up in their own obsession and their own thing, and find it very difficult to see outside of their bubble, which I think is what dark academia in general is kind of about. I find it really interesting. The main thing that held it back for me, and this I feel like is very unfair on the book, because it is an interesting book in its own right, but there were so many things that I found to be very close comparisons to The Secret History by Donna Tartt, which I read again this year. I feel like potentially if I'd read If We Were Villains before I'd read The Secret History, I might have preferred If We Were Villains, or I might have liked it more than I did, just because, yeah, I feel like there was such a lot of similarities. Now, having said that, it is not a direct blow comparison. There are a lot of differences, and I'm sure that there have been many people who have made videos, written dissertations, written theses, written essays, magazine articles, blog posts, etc. about the differences and the similarities. I'm not here to do that, but for me personally, I feel like it was difficult to not constantly be comparing it to The Secret History, and therefore I felt like it potentially let itself down that way. The main areas, of course, where it differs is that this is a theatre school and they are obsessed with Shakespeare and they are working on Shakespeare and they become very embroiled in Shakespeare, whereas The Secret History, it is all about Greece. However, I don't think we would have Shakespeare if we didn't have Homer. We wouldn't have so much of what Shakespeare writes about and the way he writes and the way he structures sentences and everything if we didn't have Greek mythology, if we didn't have people like Homer and Virgil. And so for me, those differences aren't as different as as other people might potentially find them, because, yeah, like I said, if we didn't have Homer, we wouldn't have Shakespeare. And you can really see the way that Shakespeare was influenced by things like the Iliad and the Odyssey and the Aeneid. I guess for me, it's not as big of a difference as you might imagine that it would be. And the other thing that kind of bugged me, and I know that it was obviously intentional and, like, in some ways it totally worked in the story, but it just kind of bugged me how much Shakespeare, like direct quotes from the plays there was, and how much the characters were quoting Shakespeare at each other. And although it does make sense to the story and to the types of characters they were and to the way that it's written, so that we see that it's about obsession and that insular way of thinking when you're in this verified environment and you're living and breathing the work that you're doing and the things that you're learning. So it was definitely intentional, but it just kind of bugged me a little bit. It felt very pretentious, although that's obviously the point, and I do think dark academia is pretentious on purpose for the most part. But yeah, take all of that as you will. Take it with a grain of salt, but you know, I definitely think if you enjoy The Secret History or other dark academia books, you would enjoy this one. For me, I think it just didn't benefit from the direct comparison. I'm going to talk about two books now together, and that is City of Dragons and Blood of Dragons by Robin Hobb. So this is book 3 and 4 of the Rainwild Chronicles. Anyone that's been around for a little while, you will know a couple of things about me and Robin Hobb. First of all, I claim that The Realm of the Elderlings is one of my favourite series of all time, and yet, as you will know if you know anything about what it should look like, I don't own, I will soon, but I don't own and had not read the Rainwild Chronicles. I think the reason for that is because when you read the Farseer trilogy, you read from Fitz's point of view. Then you switch and you read the live ship traders and you read from a variety of different perspectives. Then you go to the Tawny Man series and you go back to Fitz and you go back to the Six Duchies. And then I was expecting to come back to Althea and Brashen and Selden and Kefria and Malta and all the different characters that I had absolutely loved in the live ship traders. But in the first book of the Rainwild Chronicles, which is Dragon Keeper, you don't follow them at all. You actually go to Malta and Selden in this final book, but you don't follow those characters at all, and I just didn't find it as interesting. To be honest with you, I only read the first probably 2 chapters of the first book, and then I think I just got distracted by other things and I never bothered to go back. But now I have read them and absolutely, absolutely love them. Now, I don't want to go into any detail about what these 2 books are about, because they are the 3rd and 4th book, the final 2 books of a quartet, which is the second to last series in the overarching Realm of the Elderling series. So it's kind of one of those things where if I go into too much detail, then I'm going to spoil an awful lot of stuff. But just know that I absolutely love these books. I'm so incredibly glad that I read the Rainwild Chronicles, and I am annoyed with myself for not having read them before. I feel like I probably need to go back because, yes, even though I haven't read these, I had then, of course, to go and get Fool's Assassin and the rest of I think it's called the Fitz and the Fool trilogy, which is the final trilogy. I feel like I now need to go and reread the Fitz and the Fool trilogy because there's probably a bunch of stuff that happened in here that will be referenced that I may not have understood the first time around, the only time that I read the Fitz and the Fool series. I also feel like maybe I want to do a whole entire new reread of the Robin Hobb series. Comment below if potentially reading Robin Hobb for the first time or second time or third time is something that you might be interested in doing with me next year or next year and the year after. I know that there have been many read-alongs of this series on BookTube. I know that a few years ago the Catch-Up Book Club were reading these. So I know it's been something that's happened multiple times on BookTube. So, you know, fair enough if you're not interested in doing that. I can just do it with myself. I can just read books for myself. But if anyone wants to do a reread or a read of the Robin Hobb, if you missed out and you want to do it, let me know and we'll see if we can figure something out because I think that would be really fun. Although I'm making a bunch of plans for next year now in November and getting slightly worried about all the things I want to do, but that's not the point. But yeah, Robin Hobb I think is an absolutely wonderful world builder and an absolutely amazing character writer. She writes characters in such a way that you really get immersed in them and their thoughts and their feelings, and when they are doing something that you don't think is the right thing, you still fully understand why they're doing that, and you just really feel for the characters. You get in their heads and you feel for the characters so much, and she pulls at your heartstrings because she's always mean to her characters, but it's so well done, it's so well written, it's so immensely readable. I flew through these. Another thing that I started reading the Rainwilds a while ago and then it was kind of like, oh, they're long, you know, Robin Hobb's intense. But I flew through these. I absolutely love them, which is another reason why I'm thinking maybe another reread, because I feel like I've got my passion for Rob back. Not that I had ever lost it, because I keep constantly saying it's one of my favourite series, but, you know, you need a bit of a break sometimes between things, even when you love them. But yeah, love this series. So glad I finally read the Rainwilds. Gave them 9.43 and 9.86 on CallPile, 5 stars each. And yeah, comment below and let me know what you think of my possible read along, maybe plan for next year. Anywho, the next book I want to talk to you about today is The Wife and the Widow by Christian White. But first I need to have a quick drink of water. Anyway, as I was saying, the next book I want to talk to you about is The Wife and the Widow by Christian White. This is a murder mystery book set in, I believe it's a fictional island, but it's an island off the Sydney coast. Is it Sydney or Melbourne? Might be Melbourne. Anyway, either way, set in Australia. this woman, Kate, who is the widow, goes to the airport to meet her husband. She goes with her daughter to meet her husband, who's coming back from the UK and on a business trip, and he doesn't turn up. And so she rings his company to find out what's going on, and they say he hasn't worked here for 3 months. So she's like, what the hell? Where is my husband? What's happened to him? And why did he not tell me? So then her and her father-in-law go to this island where her and her husband have this holiday house. They go there to see if they can find him. They go to the house and they see evidence that he was there, but they can't find him. And so they decide to stay and talk to the police and see what's going on. And then you switch perspectives, and then so you're in Kate's head, and then you switch perspectives and you're following the wife. And the wife is Abby, and Abby is slowly uncovering things around the house, evidence to suggest that her partner, her husband, may have killed somebody. And it slowly unravels what happened and what the connection is. I thought that I'd figured out what was going to be the point of the whole book very early on, because it definitely leads you down a particular direction, thinking a particular thing has happened. But then you get the reveal that you realise that it's not actually what you thought. Yeah, I thought it was quite well done. I gave this a 6.29 on Callpilot, which is 3.5 stars as well. But I did, like I said, I did think this was, the twist was quite well done, and the reveal was quite well done, and the way that he'd structured that was quite well done. But I didn't love the language that was used in this book. I didn't love the writing style. There were a few instances, and you realise later kind of why it is, but there are a few instances where it feels very, I guess, kind of old-fashioned in the way that people are talking, particularly in regards to LGBTQIA+ people and culture. I can't remember specifics, but there were a few instances that comments were made that just really bugged me, and I just didn't like the way that they were handled, and I didn't love some of the way that the sort of motivation behind what had happened and who had done what was. I didn't love the motivations behind what had happened there, although I did quite like I said, the reveal and then the kind of reason why things had been done the way they'd been done. But yeah, wasn't my favourite. I did enjoy it. It was a fun read. It was enough to want me to keep going with it, find out what was going on. And even though I thought I'd figured it out, I still wanted to know if I had. So I would recommend. I just don't think it's the best thing, basically. And then the final thing that I want to talk to you about today is the Iliad by Homer. So I'm not going to go into details about this because I'm doing a project with Paige and my friend Max, which we're still working on. It will be coming, I promise. It's still happening, but anyway. I'm not going to go into a huge amount of detail, but I've been reading this for probably 3 months and I finally finished it in October. I think I probably ended up reading about a quarter or something like that, or less probably. I read the last, I'd say, like 250 pages of the Iliad. It was fun. I'm not going to go into any more detail than that. Like I said, the projects will be revealed at some point and hopefully you will watch and enjoy. But anyway, that's my October wrap-up. Those are all the books that I read in October, or read some of in October. I'm not going to talk about stats because, as you may know, I do my stats in another video, so if you want to know any of those things, maybe subscribe. If you're not already, and keep an eye out for my Diversify Me for October. If you want to comment on anything I've talked about here today, please do so. If you'd like to leave me a comment but you don't know what, then leave me a dragon emoji because we have 2 books about and with dragons on the cover. All of my social media details are listed in the description below, so if you'd like to go and follow me on any of those other platforms, please feel free to do so. Thank you so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, I would absolutely love it if you would subscribe to my channel and give this video a thumbs up. And yeah, like I said, thank you so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed this video and I will see you next time.